Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the invitation. I'll take it basically from where Arlene has left it. Arlene said, this will happen. We are serious about that. And I can only confirm it. Let me give you three, before going down to the substance, but give you three administrative or bureaucratic reasons which show how serious we are on that. First of all, as you know, the Commission set up a high-level expert group where Moniko Jens was part of, chaired by Erkki Liikanen. Second, the Commission itself has set up a new unit, and that's, you should always take it as a great sign that we are very serious about that. And the head of the unit is here, actually, Alan Deckers. So that is obviously an important sign. And the third important sign, and I say to my friend Wolf Klintz and Arlene McCarthy, is that the EP made a non-initiative report, which to my knowledge does not happen for all initiatives. So when it happens, it signals that this is something you are looking at that. What are the issues here, and how can we tackle these? How can we tackle this problem? I think the most important thing that we will have to do, Commission and the European institution and co-legislators, we will have to do is to prove the complementarity of these with all the other measures that we have been doing. How does this fit with all the other measures that we have been doing? And when you think of the enormous, or someone said the tsunami activities that we have done in the last few years, when you think of it, basically you can put them in three boxes. We have done lots in the area of regulation, prudential rules and regulations. CRD3, CRD4 were mentioned. We have done a lot in the area of supervision. We have moved, or we are moving now to the banking union. We have done the reform of supervision only 2 years ago, and seems centuries ago. And we are doing a lot in the area of resolution, of course. And we have out now a proposal on crisis management and bank resolution, and that proposal is being discussed in the Parliament. So all those three areas have been tackled. So one could say, well, there is apparently a lot that has been done, and the high-level expert group actually responded to that. And I'm quoting one line where the high-level expert group said, the current reform agenda does not fully correct incentives for excessive risk-taking, complexity, and intra-group subsidies. And to me, the crucial issue is really here, the incentive. Is the current reform agenda was absolutely fundamental to put the system back on track, to make sure we have a system that works, that we don't fight yesterday battle, but we prepare the system for tomorrow's world. And then there is the issue of incentive. Have we put in the current reform agenda enough incentive for what? For the banks, if you want, going back to normal. Basically, the banks doing a normal job that a bank should do. If you try to explain what a bank should do to a normal person, a normally constituted person, I would probably go for a simple thing. I would say, a bank is something that tries to allocate money across people and across time. I think that's more or less what the banks does, transforming today non-consumption, so today's saving, into tomorrow's consumption via investment. And this is the banal thing that we want to go back to. And this is probably what someone could call a bit pompously a healthy relationship between finance and production. And I think the issue, it's all here, is whether we have enough incentives or we need some more incentive to make sure that the banking system does serve the real economy. And when I mean does serve the real economy, there are many facets to the real economy. One, which is the most obvious, is the bank lending, but there are others. For example, market making sure that corporates have access to a very liquid and thick market, or that sovereign, for example, can go out and find the funds they need. So I think that is the first issue, the incentives for serving the real economy. I'm taking, I think Arlene mentioned this point, the growth point. after having mentioned financial stability. I have mentioned it first, as very first point, before mentioning financial stability. Second point, of course, is the issue of the financial stability. Financial stability, as we know, depends essentially on two things. On the probability that something goes down or that something goes badly, so on the probability of default, and two, on the cost of that default if that default happens. Now, when you look at the at an eventual resolution, at an eventual structural proposal, you see that it actually looks and touches at both aspects. Some of those aspects were obviously also touched by CRD3 and CRD4. We have always argued, and we will continue to argue, and I will certainly argue, that having increased both quality and quantity of capital in CRD4 does reduce the probability of failure. There's no doubt, because at that point you have a much better capitalized bank, you have much lower leverage, and therefore you do reduce the probability of failure. And one could also argue you also do reduce the cost of that failure, because if you have greater and better quality capital, you may absorb more of that. But you could also argue that, of course, the fact that you have some intragroup subsidies, or the fact that you have some functions that necessarily needs always to stay there, like the basic banking function of deposit taking, having that function which finances other activities more risky, well, that may create some sort of strange incentives that at the end of the day doesn't go exactly in the direction of reducing the probability of failure or reducing the cost of that failure. So also in that respect, I think the structural reforms can happen. There is then a third reason which should not be underestimated, is that if what I've said till now would not be true, or would not be particularly felt as important by most of the stakeholders, we probably would have not observed what actually we did observe. What we did observe is that a number of countries within Europe, and Mrs. McCarthy has cited few, but also outside Europe, are going, or have gone, or are thinking of going into this direction. So this is clearly an area where there is lots of activities. But if you think within Europe, lots of legislative activity, if you think within Europe of the famous 8,000 and many banks that Europe has, well, of those 8,000 many banks that Europe has, only some, not all of them, but some, small numbers, at very maximum a 3-digit number, not bigger than that, may be affected by these things. And so at the end of the day, they risk to be always the same. That you regulate them from country A or from country B or from country C, actually these banks tend to be relatively European, so tend to have a European way of developing. It doesn't make particularly sense to regulate it from one or their angle, instead than regulating it from the let's say the overall angle, and the not angle at that point, but from the overall view, and take an overall vision of that. So I think basically when you look at the issue, the very important thing to do here is to show how these structural reforms do complement all the other reforms that have been done in the three major areas: supervision, regulation, and resolution, and then making sure that whatever structural reform you do it in a way that you always keep in mind the final objective. And I repeat, the final objective is very clear, is the one of making sure that banks behave as banks, really support the economies, and in supporting the economy, they lend to those who are able to invest. The numbers that Daniel Gross has quoted before about low productivity are very telling. We are getting to it, there's no doubt. There is a full unit working on it, and we are looking at various things. This is a big reform, of course. This is not tilting with the numbers at the margin. This is clear that it's a big reform. So we need to do it. We need to do it pretty well. And there are a number of areas where you have seen that those who have already embarked into that reforms have taken different options. First one is, where do you put defense? Do you put defense around the retail activities, so to protect them from the rest? Or do you put defense around the investment or the trading activities, so to make sure that those activities are self-contained and they do not spill over? So that's the first issue. Where do you put defense? Another issue could be, which, to keep with the same image, which type of fence do you put? Do you put a fence very high, meaning true separation, or do you put a fence which there is a little door, meaning functional separation, but not strictly legal separation? So which type of fence, which type of separation do you need in order to achieve the objectives I've just said before? And then there is, of course, the issue of distinguishing what is, or maybe trading, investment, and outside the real economy needs, and what in reality it is very much into the real economy needs. During the Liikanen group, we interviewed many bankers, but also many bankers' clients. And one of the most impressive, I'm sure Monique also remembered, was a guy who had a vineyard, good one. I never tasted his wine, but seemed okay, but not extremely famous. Had a nice vineyard, and this guy came and we asked him a simple question: what are your relationship with the bank? And basically the guy said that what he does with the bank is what you all expect: deposit taking, using it as a mean of payment, and so on and on. But he also stressed it that given that he was exporting a lot outside Europe, was exporting in the United States, was exporting in Australia, was exporting in South Africa, and so on and on, he needed lots of coverage and he needed lots of hedging. So he made the point that he uses a particular bank for not only basic needs, but also some sort of sophisticated needs, hedging his position, and so on and on. And I think this is what we need to be able to distinguish, and not to throw away the baby with the water, but understand what are the client services. I think I can stop there, and that's it.